Hello, and welcome to this screencast where we're going to go through some of the key moments in the history of social movements led by students in the UK. We are going to focus specifically on social movements taken up by students from the 1960s till the present. Although we are only focusing on more recent events, it is important to highlight that there were always associations of students that acted for social change and enacted political power. Examples of clear student action go back to the 16th century and are linked to key social transformations that go beyond the university campus. But we start with the 1960s and go towards the 1980s in this first period. The cultural and social revolution of the 1960s is well documented and commonly referred to as a period of great social change. The generation of the baby boomers was the first to have access to education and to be able to build a life without the perspective of war, and so a key feature of this period is the active political engagement of students with social and political issues that related to labor, race, and gender. For example, students protested world events such as the Vietnam War and the apartheid system of social segregation in South Africa. During this period, the way the university was governed through a very strict and authoritarian structure was also a focus of students' protests, who fought for the right of expression and accessibility to higher education. This period saw the driving forward of the democratic principles and values held by these students, which led to a restructuring of a strict character of higher education institutions and started paving the way for more equality of access to universities. This period is generally regarded as one of the big heights of student engagement in the UK. From the 1980s, the political climate shifted in the UK with the government of Margaret Thatcher. Scholars and social commentators argue that during this period, universities started losing their autonomy and increasingly became agents of the state and the market. This phenomenon is often referred to as the marketization of higher education. This period saw the increase in barriers for student action, particularly through changes in funding and the structure of the student union, which was given the status of a charity, which meant they no longer could use university funds and needed to be worrying about financing themselves and their employees rather than lobbying and going on demonstrations. As a consequence of this change, many student unions became largely about the provision of services, such as bars or shops. Legislation creating barriers to student movements reached perhaps a height in 1984, where legislation outlawed the National Union of Students, who were at the time deemed by the government as a group of fascists. And I'm quoting here. Additionally, some donations provided by the student unions to labor causes such as the miners' strikes were ruled illegal. The marketization of higher education and the continuous legislation that poses barriers to student engagement continues to rise in the UK. In 2010, legislation continues to be developed and charities are stating that unions cannot support campaigns that do not affect students directly. Also, laws are being written that criminalize the rights to protest. However, in 2010, this year marks a turning point in student action, and many commentators argue it will reignite the active engagement of social movements that we saw in the 1960s. As Rodriguez and Amat and Jeffrey put it, the illusion of apathy among young people was shattered, and student unions and students have been increasingly taking action against unfair and exclusive practices in higher education. It all starts with the student occupation of the Middlesex University in May 2010, following the closure of an award-winning philosophy department. Then the occupation of the Conservative Party headquarters at Millbank, called by the National Union of Students and the University College Union, with the support of the Education Activist Network and the National Campaign Against Fees and Cuts, following the tripling of tuition fees from £3,000 to £9,000, and the elimination of the Education Maintenance Allowance, which gave £30 per week to students who came from poor backgrounds. Between November 2010 and January 2011, hundreds of assemblies and organizations were involved in carrying out an 8-day period of national action that was filled with rallies and demonstrations. Around 50 universities were occupied by students. We will all know that the outcome of the government decision was still to pass and approve the rise in tuition fees, which were then approved in December the 9th by Parliament. However, the spark for social change had been ignited, and what we see after 2010 is a proliferation of social movements and active citizenship enacted by students and student unions. Some of the actions more recently taken by students comprise of the 10-city university, which was part of the international Occupy movement and aims to provide an alternative to the marketization of universities. At 10-city university, lectures and workshops are put on for free, delivered by academics, students, and anyone who wants to be involved. The decolonizing the university movement, like the Occupy movement, is an international effort that seeks to undo the harmful legacies of colonialism in higher education, in the curriculum, and reading lists, and in other discriminatory experiences for staff and students. The rent strikes have become very popular, and they aim to promote fairer prices for students in their accommodation. Anti-casualization work is being done in tandem with other university unions like the University College Union, and it's against the precarious contracts academic staff are working currently on. Anti-cuts movements work to undo the harmful cuts imposed by the government to universities, which have seen the decrease of resources and shutting down of university departments, among other losses. The National Union of Students is a great place to start looking into what is currently being done to improve our social and political context, and we will be exploring it further in this topic. Thank you so much for listening.